Hello, today I am happy to introduce you to my new friend, Lisa Appelo. Did I say that correctly?
You did,
Oh,
Appelo.
goody. Appelo. Lisa lives in Florida. She has two kids left at home still, and five who have flown the nest. And Lisa is an author and a speaker, and she inspires women to have hope and to grow deeper in their faith through grief, which is not the most cheerful subject of the world at any given day, but it's a subject that we need to address because we all have losses. Wouldn't you agree, Lisa?
Yes. And, as you said that, I thought to myself, this is not the area that I wanted, the ministry that I sought from the Lord. In fact, when God called me to write, I really tried to write about some other things like homeschooling and some other things, and God just shut those doors.
Hmm.
And I have just leaned into it. It sometimes is a very sober subject, right? But you are right that when we begin to get to know those around us and get a little bit below the surface of how are you doing conversations, we
Hmm.
realize how many people are walking through shattering losses and grief, have
Right.
experienced it.
Hmm. And that was one of my questions. What made you begin writing?
Oh, well, sorry, I jumped ahead.
No, no.
Yeah. So, my story here really begins about 10 years ago when I woke up. I was married to my high school sweetheart. He was my first date and my only date. And life
Wow.
was not perfect. We did not have a perfect marriage. But if you had asked me 10 years ago, it was the life that I wanted. We had 7 kids in the home. Life was super busy. And on a Friday morning, I woke up. It was still dark to his funny breathing on the pillow next to mine. And I wasn't even awake enough to open my eyes, but I just kind of instinctively reached my hand over and nudged him and said, "It's just a nightmare, hun," fully expecting he would roll over and then we would fall back asleep and we would wake up to his alarm in a couple hours.
Does he
But
have, did he have nightmares? Is that why you even say
he would
that?
wake up snoring. It was
Oh,
very
yeah.
common for him to
Hmm.
snore, but this was I guess that I was awake enough to sense that this was not just a snore, but kind of a unusual,
Hmm.
breathing. And as I woke up more, I realized he hadn't stopped that unusual breathing. I flipped on the overhead light. I could see immediately something was very wrong. He was unresponsive.
Hmm.
And this had come with no signs or symptoms or warning of any kind. And so, went into crisis mode. I called 911. My kids were on sleeping bags right outside of our bedroom and they heard me calling out to him. The big ones came in and my 4-year-old had kind of crawled into bed between the two of us. And just, man, the way life, just the surrealness of these moments that are just forever engraved, in all of my senses. But I started not CPR on him, and I didn't even get through 2 rounds when the paramedics came. So they
Oh,
were right outside of our neighborhood.
I was gonna ask you how long did it take for them to come? Because that's always a
Yeah,
worry to me. Like, how long will it take?
I know it. The fire station is right outside of our neighborhood. And so when they came, I was like, I knew it was quick. And so I was like, he is in good hands. He's going to be so mad when he wakes up and realizes that he has to miss work today. Um, then I could hear some good. They shushed me out of the room. And walking in that room next to my bedroom, I just was praying out loud, God, have mercy on us. Lord, have mercy on us.
Mm.
And my kids by this time were upstairs. They took him by ambulance to the emergency room. And I went upstairs to go talk to my kids before I left to go to the emergency room as well. And I will never forget walking into their room, into the boys' room. They were all huddled together. It was still dark, crying.
Mm.
And I wanted to say, it's gonna be okay. He's gonna be okay. Like that's the mom in us,
Sure,
right?
of
We
course.
want to fix it. And as those words were forming on my tongue, I realized I can't promise them that.
Mm.
And so I knelt down and I prayed with them and I told them the only thing that I could, which is that I would be back. I would be back. And I went to the hospital, and it was not long after I got there that they took me into the room you never want to go into. It's the counseling room. You want to go into the patient room. And the ER doctor told me that they had worked on Dan for over 2 hours and they had never been able to revive him.
Oh my goodness.
And so that was it. I mean, just in the space of one night's sleep, life shattered in every way imaginable for us.
Hmm. How old was he?
He was 46.
So young. Did they do autopsy? Is that too nosy to ask?
No, that is not. They did do an autopsy. They required it, which was because he was so young.
Mhm.
And I was glad we wanted answers. And he had cardiomyopathy, which is treatable. We hear it
Hmm.
in the news now because of the last 2 years we've been through. It can be viral, it can be genetic. But had he known, and I have medical people in my family who treat patients with this all the time,
Hmm.
could be a pacemaker, could be prescription medication, but we didn't know. And I just, it didn't take me long to process that. I did have to for sure process that with the Lord, that God could have saved him, that he could have
Mhm.
given us the warning.
A clue of some sort.
But
When
in
you
God's,
when you tell your kids God is in control and yet their dad still dies, how do you talk to them about that?
one of the verses we had memorized as a family was Psalm 139. I think it was one of the first verses we
Mhm.
memorized. And I used to wake up in the morning reciting that verse, kind of stealing a few minutes more in bed. And one of the Psalm 139:16 says, every day was recorded in your book before one of them came to be.
Wow.
And that verse came back to me and held me. I did not realize, maybe I did, how much memorizing scripture, how much being in the word, just those everyday, day in, day out times that we have, that's forming our theology for us.
Mm.
And it is aligning us so that when we go through a hardship, because it's not if, right?
Mhm.
It may not look like ours did, but we will all go through loss. We will all go through suffering.
Mm.
We will all go through unexpected hard. And when we go through that time, boy, those verses that we have learned, that those scriptures that we have, studied, they're like anchors for us.
Hmm. Wow. Well, that is such a sad story. And I say but I don't mean but like it's not any less sad. But God has definitely put his hand on you for you to even be able to speak this calmly. It's only been 10 years, did you say?
It's been 10 years. Yes. I mean, I have a little tear in my eye. You can't
Yeah,
see.
I can kind of
Um,
see it.
it is grief definitely softens. And I thought that I would never really smile again. I
Mm,
thought, I don't think I'll ever really have that joy that just bubbles up from those moments that God gives us that are just beautiful. Maybe I'll, raise my kids the best I can, but I don't think I'll ever smile again.
oh, wow.
And thank goodness that's not true. That if we do the hard work of grief and if we will trust God, he does restore joy to us.
What do you mean by the hard work of grief?
Well, we can't escape it. There's no shortcuts through it. How I wish when I sit with new widows or people in new loss, how I wish I could say, here's the shortcut,
Hmm.
because I can see their pain and their anguish. But there are no shortcuts. There's no way to, if we try to, I always said, if we don't deal with grief on our terms now, then it's going to come back on its terms later. And so we have to we have to meet it. But there are ways to deal with it. The Bible gives us a lot of ways. One is lament. We see that all through the word. We see that in Psalms. And so that if we will grieve, we will take our pain and our anguish and our questions and our hard emotions to God and then lay them there and trust him. It's like saying, Lord, I am hurting, but I trust you. Lord, I don't understand why this would happen to us, but
Hmm.
I trust you. I am fearful of the future, but I trust you. That is all lament. And it is a way to process our grief.
Give me the title of the book. I had it, but I want the whole tagline as well.
Okay. It's called Life Can Be Good Again,
Mm.
putting your world back together after it all falls apart.
Life can be good again. Boy, that sounds
Yeah.
like it's a book for every single person
Yeah.
because we all go through some sort of grief.
Yes, it is
Mhm.
definitely a book that is not just for widows. It is not just for people who've experienced, the loss of a loved one. There are a lot of ways that a life can shatter. It could be a divorce. It could be a spouse who walks out and says, "I never loved you," or even job loss. I have a dear friend who she and her husband had put their heart and soul and money and sweat into a business, and something happened and it was gone, and it just shattered, so much of their life.
Mhm.
It could be a diagnosis. It could be a chronic diagnosis for you or
Totally.
for somebody in your family that just changes life as we know it.
You keep using the word shatter. Why did that
Mm.
come to you?
For me, and I think for so many, I hear people describe it this way. When that doctor told me, we haven't been able to revive him, it felt like he took, like my life was this Venetian vase that we had been working on, that this marriage that it hadn't just happened. We had worked hard, to get through these stresses and struggles and arguments, and just we had worked hard to shape our family. We had a vision for our children and our
Mm,
family, and it felt like this Venetian vase that somebody had just dropped,
mm,
and it shattered, and it would never, there was no way to put those pieces back together again.
mm. Yeah.
And I think, what I didn't see then that I know now is that while life will never be the way it was, God can come in and take those pieces and reshape us in ways and build new beauty. And it's not what we would have expected, or maybe even what we wanted, or, this is not the life I chose. And yet God brings that new beauty in for us.
That reminds me of a question I wanted to ask you. You say it's not plan B. What happens to us?
Mm.
It's chapter two. I've heard that expression plan. Well, this is plan B. And we usually say it kind of lightly, like we thought we were going to go to, go shopping all afternoon, but instead our husband had other plans that we weren't, that's a plan B. That sounds so light, so inconsequential. But we are talking about life and death. So, and your life being shattered by
Mm.
something. So what do you mean? It's not a plan B, it's chapter two.
I thought that I would just make the most out of life. This isn't what I wanted. I'm dealing now with the leftovers of the life that I wanted, but
Mm,
I will just make the most of this life. And somewhere in the second year of grief, it was not early on, I was just being very honest with the Lord in my quiet time. And I said, not audibly in my thoughts, I don't like my life. And on the heels of that thought came this: while I did not expect this, God had allowed it. And as such, it was not a plan B. It was not second best. God does not give his children second best or the leftovers of some other life. That this was an intentional and purposeful chapter two. And so, as such, it had as much abundance and joy and good this side of Dan's loss as all the days before.
mm.
And I didn't immediately, just say, okay, well, I feel all better now. What a
Yeah,
bow on everything.
right.
But what it did do is it realigned my heart, or my thoughts to the truth, until my heart caught up, until my emotions caught up.
Mm, that's so good. And do you still find yourself becoming despairing or despondent?
Not, I have to really think about that. That's a good question. It's no, I do sometimes or often feel the gaping hole of loss. So I'm not remarried. And if you
Mm.
told me that 10 years ago, I would have been very upset. I wanted to be married. I love
I was gonna
marriage.
ask you that offline if you were.
No, I am not. And I'm open to it. I think for a long time, I was just really focused on my children,
Sure.
making sure that they were okay. Um, but, so in my parenting, at every dinner, at every milestone that my kids hit, at every Christmas, we feel the gaping hole of Dan not being there. Even going through a parenting struggle where I'm trying to figure out, how to get my children, even my adult children, counseling them through something. I will sometimes think, oh, he could have just spoken into this so well.
Mhm.
But I don't give in to the lie that this wouldn't have been happen. This wouldn't happen. Like, oh, my kids wouldn't be dealing with this, or I wouldn't be dealing with this struggle, or I wouldn't be having a hard time, in general with parenting. if he were here. That's just a
Mm,
lie. And God is a perfect father.
mm,
And so the only thing that gaping hole of loss does for me is it just makes me lean on God. It requires me to lean on God. I don't have somebody on this side of, earthly husband to go to say, hey, let's talk this through, or what do you think, or what's your counsel, or can you take over? I have to rely on the Lord. And he's been so faithful, Sue.
Have you found that your kids are bitter
They
because they are younger? I guess that was a kind of a rude question. I would
no.
think that when we would say to our child, well, this is God's will, that could make them feel a little upset with a God who would take their dad.
Mhm.
That's my question. How do you comfort a younger child who hasn't been through anything quite so horrible?
Right. I have not seen bitterness so far in my kids. Now I still have two that are being formed, and their faith
Mhm,
is being formed.
mhm,
I pray that they will see me honestly walking these things out, not just slapping a platitude or a band-aid over it, but saying it's okay to say, this is painful.
mm,
And I wish my dad was here. And at the same time saying, but God, I am trusting you in this. I'm
mm,
dependent on you in this. I need you in this. I need your counsel.
mm,
And the way we walk our kids through it is just like that. There is, everybody grieves differently. Children for sure grieve differently than adults. A 4-year-old is going to grieve differently than a teen, a girl than a boy.
mm,
And so just honestly walking them through, and I think we provide a safe place for them to ask questions. And I think that we keep the conversation open.
mm. That's probably
It's
the main
too
thing.
much. Grief is too heavy, especially for a 4-year-old to
Right.
carry all at the same time. And so they'll kind of go in and out. They'll play all day. And then at night, when they're laying their head on the pillow, it'll come to the
Sure.
surface.
Mm,
So being open, for my teen daughter, 17-year-old, she always wanted to have the conversation at 11:30 at night when I was
that's hard.
exhausted, ready to go to
Mm,
bed. And she'd be like, can you talk? So I think just keeping that conversation open, and showing them that how we are honestly walking through it.
mm. We have a few minutes left, and this podcast is about legacy, and
Yes.
I can probably figure out what your legacy is because you've expressed how to go through grief so beautifully. But what would you say is the legacy you want to leave for those who know and love you?
For sure, I've thought a lot about legacy, knowing that Dan has his legacy is already, done.
Mhm.
I hope that my kids and my grandchildren will see me as a woman who trusted God on the good days and on the hard days, and not perfect. Boy, they can see me not be perfect, but that I trusted the Lord, and that my faith just grew deeper and deeper and deeper.
Mhm. And what has been the most challenging for that to be able to do that legacy?
Yeah, I think the most challenging is that we live with our kids and they see us.
Mm,
We
yeah,
can't
you
preach
can't
one thing
you can't
and
hide
live
from them, huh?
another.
Yeah,
We cannot. And I'm a homeschooling mom, so
yeah.
they are with me. I have had my moments of frustration in teaching and in parenting. But in those times to just say, I messed up, to humbly apologize and to say, this is why I need a savior.
Hmm.
I'm not perfect. I hope that you will, over the course of time, see God's work in me and see me become more like Christ 5 years from now than I am now. But this is why I need a savior. This is why we need a savior.
Hmm. And how do you display God's welcoming heart in your life? And I don't mean just
Mm,
hospitality, I mean being winsome for Jesus.
yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, when my heart shattered, I remember saying to the Lord multiple times, Lord, I am broken open. You might as well clean me out now. And I think one of the things, God, if we will let God can take these times where we are shattered and broken open and reshape us like his son. And I think one of the things that I see in myself, but I also see it in others who've walked through hardship, is a heart of compassion.
Mm,
I thought I was compassionate before,
right.
but now I think I have so much more compassion for those who are struggling and going through really difficult things. And then my, heart is in ministry to This weekend we'll be having our first in-person widows gathering for widows of all ages and stages
Mm.
locally. But just to meet with women, to teach them in my local church, and to meet with them over coffee or when I'm speaking, and just listen to them
Hmm.
and enter into that place of hurt with them.
Hmm. Lisa, what a beautiful ministry that people who are listening are thinking, I hope I don't have to do it the same way. But what's so beautiful is that you say you love Jesus even more now. And I think that's something we all want. We want to love
Yeah.
Jesus more. And I can see that in your life and through your life. You have so many resources on your website. Where can people find you?
The best place to find me is at my website, Appelo.com. It's two P's and one L. And that's the hub where they can find articles or, all of my social media connections. They can get freebies there.
Okay. And aren't you offering something just for the holidays?
I am. So I've got a resource for the holidays. Holidays are hard. And that is a time when we just can feel the loss really just
Mm.
stand out in relief. Everybody else is celebrating and gathering with family. And that empty chair at the table is so hard to see. And so I have a resource there. If you will go to lisaappelo.com, you will find that resource there.
Okay. Thank you so much. And you will be giving away a copy of your book. Say the name again. And then if you will comment on this episode, either on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, or just send me a little email. Sometimes people do that. We will enter your name into the giveaway. Go ahead and repeat the name of your book.
Sure. So the book is called Life Can Be Good Again, Putting Your
Mm.
World Back Together After It All Falls Apart.
Wow. Wow. Life can be good again. Lisa, you've
Mm.
been such a blessing. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. And I hope your Widows Conference goes well. I know it will, and be the first of many. We
Thank
need
you
you.
so much.
We
Thank
need
you,
your
Sue.
message. Thank you.